At my great-grandchild's gender reveal party, my granddaughter asked me to stay away from the main table, saying, "You're not part of this new chapter." She froze when she saw who had paid for the entire party's decorations. "Your presence here means so much to me. Watch until the end and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has reached." I never thought my own granddaughter would break my heart so completely. The day of my great-grandchild's gender reveal party should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. Instead, it became the day I realized just how little I truly meant to my family. The party was held at the Willowbrook Country Club, a place far too expensive for Melissa and Ryan's supposed budget. I'd arrived an hour early, my heart fluttering with excitement. The decorations I'd secretly arranged looked perfect: soft blue and pink roses cascading from crystal vases, delicate balloon arches, and personalized favors for each guest. It had cost me nearly $8,000, but seeing Melissa's face when she walked in would be worth every penny. "Grandma Joyce, what are you doing up here?" Melissa's voice cut through my thoughts as I adjusted a centerpiece on the main table. Her tone wasn't curious, it was sharp, annoyed. I turned around, smiling despite the unexpected chill in her voice. "Just making sure everything is perfect for your special day, sweetheart." Melissa glanced nervously toward the entrance where guests would soon arrive. She was wearing a form-fitting cream dress that highlighted her small baby bump, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. My chest tightened with pride, she looked so beautiful. "That's not necessary," she said, lowering her voice. "Actually, I need you to step away from the main table." I was just... "Grandma," she interrupted, her manicured hand gripping my elbow firmly as she guided me away from the table. You're not really part of this new phase in our lives." The word struck me like a physical blow. I felt my breath catch, my mouth opening slightly but no words coming out. "I'm sure you understand," she continued, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Ryan's parents have certain expectations about how things should look. His mother is bringing her country club friends." I smoothed down my blue dress, the one I'd bought specially for today, suddenly feeling shabby and out of place. "I don't understand, Melissa. I'm your grandmother. How am I not part of this?" Melissa sighed, her expression a mixture of impatience and embarrassment. "It's complicated. Look, you can sit at table 8 in the back. That would be best." Table 8. The furthest from the main table, tucked behind a decorative pillar. "Mrs. Davidson?" A young woman from the event staff approached us, clipboard in hand. "I wanted to thank you again for your generosity. The extra floral arrangements you added really transformed the space." Melissa froze, her eyes widening as she looked from the staff member to me. "Excuse me?" Her voice had dropped to an icy whisper. The young woman smiled brightly, oblivious to the tension. "Your grandmother arranged everything. The flowers, the custom dessert table, even the photographer. She's been planning this for weeks." I watched the color drain from Melissa's face as realization dawned. She'd assumed Ryan's parents had paid for the lavish decorations, never imagining that her outdated grandmother would be capable of creating something so elegant. "You did this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded, suddenly feeling foolish. I'd wanted it to be a surprise, a demonstration of how much I loved her and this new baby. Now I understood why she'd been so shocked by the extravagance. She'd never believed I could be responsible for something so beautiful. The moment stretched between us, uncomfortable and revealing. Then Melissa's husband Ryan called her name from across the room, and the spell broke. She glanced at him, then back at me, conflict flashing across her face. "We'll talk later," she murmured before walking away, leaving me standing alone beside the decorations I'd spent weeks planning. I made it through that party on autopilot. I smiled in photos when asked, ate the cake I'd specially ordered, and watched from table 8 as my granddaughter and her husband celebrated their upcoming new arrival. No one mentioned the decorations again. No one mentioned my contribution. When the blue confetti exploded revealing a boy was on the way, I clapped and cheered with everyone else, tears in my eyes that others probably mistook for joy. I left early, slipping out while Melissa was surrounded by her friends. As I drove home to the empty house I'd once shared with my husband Robert, rain began to fall, matching the tears streaming down my face. 5 years as a widow. 38 years as a mother. 26 as a grandmother. And now, about to become a great-grandmother. All those years of loving, giving, and supporting, and this was where it had led. To a country club party where I was too embarrassing to be acknowledged, too outdated to be included. You're not really part of this new phase in our lives. The words echoed in my mind as I pulled into my driveway, the house dark and quiet. I'd spent my entire life making sure my family never went without. After Robert died, I'd become everyone's safety net, their emergency fund, their constant support. And somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible to them, useful only for what I could provide. I sat in my car long after turning off the engine, listening to the rain and wondering when exactly I'd become disposable to the people I loved most in the world. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake until dawn, replaying years of memories that suddenly took on new meaning. When had things changed between Melissa and me? When had I become someone to hide away at table 8? I made coffee and carried it to Robert's old office, a room I rarely entered since his passing. The antique desk still held stacks of photo albums and financial records I hadn't been able to sort through. Today, I needed answers that only the past could provide. I opened the oldest album, smiling at pictures of Melissa as a child. She'd spent countless weekends with us while her mother, my daughter Elizabeth, built her career. In those days, Melissa had adored me, following me around the garden, begging for bedtime stories. Things began to shift when she entered high school. The album showed fewer genuine smiles, more posed photos with Melissa slightly distanced from me. Then came her college years at Northwestern, an expensive private university she'd insisted on attending. "We have to help her, Mom," Elizabeth had said. This opportunity could change her entire future. I'd agreed without hesitation, liquidating half of my retirement fund to cover the costs. Robert had cautioned me, but I'd dismissed his concerns. Family comes first, I'd insisted. Next came her wedding album. I'd spent months helping plan that celebration, a lavish affair at the Botanica Gardens that cost me nearly $60,000. My fingers traced the image of Melissa in her wedding dress, a custom-made gown I'd paid for secretly when she'd fallen in love with a design well beyond her budget. "You're the most generous person I know," Robert had told me that night, his face worried even as he smiled. "But I wonder if they truly appreciate what you do." I hadn't wanted to hear it then. Robert had always been practical about money, while I believed family support should be unconditional. Now, surrounded by evidence of my generosity, I wondered if he'd been right all along. My cell phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. "Hello?" I answered, my voice still rough with unshed tears. "Grandma, I need to talk to you about yesterday." Her tone was businesslike, devoid of the warmth I desperately needed. "I'm listening, sweetie." "I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding," she began, the practiced diplomacy in her voice making my heart sink. "I didn't realize you'd arranged everything. I thought Ryan's parents had handled it." "That was the idea," I said softly. "It was meant to be a surprise." "Well, it certainly was that." She paused. "The thing is, Grandma, I wish you'd consulted me first. The arrangements were beautiful, but they weren't exactly what I would have chosen." I closed my eyes, absorbing the blow. Even my gift hadn't been good enough. "I understand," I lied. "Next time I'll check with you first." "About that," Melissa continued, her voice dropping slightly. "Ryan and I are having some financial challenges with the nursery. We want to convert the guest room, but the contractor quoted us $15,000 for the renovation." And there it was, the real reason for her call. Not to apologize, not to check on how I was feeling after being relegated to table 8, but to ask for more money. "That's quite a lot for a nursery," I said carefully. "Well, we need to remove a wall, and I've found this gorgeous Italian crib system." Her voice brightened as she described her plans. The designer said it would be the perfect space for our little boy. I thought about the money I'd just spent on her gender reveal party, money she hadn't even acknowledged. About the wedding I'd funded, the college education, the down payment on their house that was supposed to be a loan, but that neither she nor Ryan had ever mentioned repaying. "I'm not sure I can help with that right now, Melissa," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Had I ever denied her anything before? Silence stretched between us. "What do you mean?" she finally asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "I mean that $15,000 is a significant amount, and I've already helped quite a bit recently. But this is for your great-grandson," she said, emphasizing the last two words as if they were a binding contract. "Don't you want him to have the best start in life?" The manipulation was so obvious it made my chest ache. How had I never noticed it before? "Of course I do, but..." "I thought family was everything to you," she interrupted, her voice cool. "At least that's what you always told me." "It is, but..." "Ryan's mother already offered to help, but I wanted to give you the opportunity first. I know how important it is to you to be involved." The implication was clear: if I didn't pay, Ryan's mother would, and I'd lose whatever tenuous connection I still had with my granddaughter. "Let me think about it," I said finally, unable to bear the thought of another rejection. "We need to know by Friday," Melissa replied. "The contractor has another job lined up." After we hung up, I returned to the photo albums, this time with new eyes. I noticed something I'd missed before: how Melissa's expressions had changed over the years from genuine affection to calculated charm whenever she needed something. How the phone calls and visits had gradually aligned perfectly with financial needs. The pattern was undeniable and heartbreaking. My doorbell rang that afternoon. When I opened it, I found Elizabeth on my porch, her face tight with concern. "Mom, we need to talk," she said as she stepped inside. "Melissa called me upset about the nursery." "What's going on with you?" I looked at my daughter, the successful attorney who rarely had time to visit unless there was a problem, and wondered if she too saw me as nothing more than a convenient solution to financial problems. "Did you know," I asked quietly, "that yesterday at the gender reveal, your daughter told me I wasn't part of this new phase in her life?" Elizabeth's face registered shock, then disbelief. "Mom, I'm sure you misunderstood. Melissa would never say something like that." I led her to the living room, suddenly feeling older than my 58 years. "I didn't misunderstand, Elizabeth." She was very clear. My daughter sank onto the sofa, her professional composure momentarily fractured. There must be some explanation. Maybe she was stressed about the party. "She was embarrassed by me," I said plainly. "Until she found out I was the one who paid for everything." Elizabeth's gaze dropped to her hands. Her silence told me everything. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked quietly. "You knew how she treats me." "Mom, it's complicated. Melissa is trying to build connections with Ryan's family. They're very particular. Particular enough that her own grandmother needs to be hidden away." Elizabeth sighed. "She's young. She'll mature." "She's 26, married, and about to be a mother," I countered. "And now she's calling you because I hesitated to give her $15,000 for a nursery." Elizabeth's expression shifted subtly. "About that. I know you've always been generous, but the nursery is important to her." My heart sank. Elizabeth hadn't come to support me, she'd come to convince me to give Melissa the money. "When was the last time either of you called me just to talk?" I asked. Not to ask for money, not to complain about something, but just to see how I'm doing. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable and revealing. "That's what I thought," I said finally. After Elizabeth left, promising to talk to Melissa about her behavior, I sat in my garden watching the sunset. Robert had planted these roses for our 30th anniversary, just 2 years before cancer took him. "Beauty needs tending," he'd told me. Just like relationships. I'd tended these roses faithfully since his death. But the relationships with my daughter and granddaughter, had I really tended those, or just funded them? The next morning brought an unexpected reprieve from family drama. The community center where I occasionally volunteered was hosting a book talk by a local author. I'd signed up weeks ago, before the gender reveal debacle, and now considered canceling. "You should go," Robert would have said. "Sitting here brooding won't change anything." The auditorium was half full when I arrived. I found a seat near the back, nodding politely to a few familiar faces. The speaker was a woman perhaps a few years older than me, with silver hair pulled into an elegant knot and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "I'm Eleanor Montgomery," she began, "and today I want to talk about boundaries, family dynamics, and the courage to change patterns even late in life." I nearly laughed at the coincidence. Had the universe sent me here specifically today? Eleanor spoke with the wisdom of someone who had lived through her own family struggles. She described giving everything to children who gradually came to expect it, then demand it. "Love doesn't mean being a doormat," she said at one point, her gaze seeming to find mine in the audience. "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no." After the talk, I lingered as others approached Eleanor for book signings. When the crowd thinned, I found myself moving toward her table. "I enjoyed your talk," I said simply. Eleanor smiled warmly. "Thank you for coming. I'm Eleanor. Joyce Davidson." "Did anything in particular resonate with you, Joyce?" Before I could stop myself, I was telling her about the gender reveal, about Melissa's rejection and subsequent financial request, about Elizabeth's expectations. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression compassionate but not pitying. When I finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "It sounds like they've come to see you as a resource rather than a person," she said gently. "That's a painful realization." "I just don't understand how we got here," I admitted. "I thought I was showing love." "You were," she assured me. "But somewhere along the way, giving became your role, and taking became theirs. How do I change that?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. "Is it even possible at this point?" Eleanor smiled again, this time with a hint of mischief. "It's not only possible, it's necessary, for your sake and theirs." She reached into her bag and pulled out a card. "Our book club meets on Thursdays. We're all women navigating similar transitions. You might find it helpful." I took the card, oddly touched by this unexpected connection. "Thank you. I'll think about it." Over the next week, Melissa called daily, each conversation more pressured than the last. The nursery deadline was approaching. Ryan's mother was offering to help. Didn't I want to be part of my great-grandson's life? During one call, she finally dropped all pretense. "Grandma, I don't understand why you're suddenly being so difficult. You've always helped us before." "I've been thinking about that," I said carefully. "About why I always say yes, and why you always expect me to. What's that supposed to mean?" Her voice took on the defensive edge I was becoming too familiar with. "It means I'm not saying yes this time, Melissa." "Is this because of where you sat at the party? Are you really that petty?" The accusation stung, but something in me had shifted. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind. "Love doesn't mean being a doormat." "This isn't about the party," I said, though of course it was partly about that. "It's about respect. It's about valuing me for more than my checkbook." "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "But fine. Ryan's mom already said she'd handle it. At least she cares about being involved in her grandson's life." The call ended with Melissa angry and me surprisingly calm. I knew there would be consequences to my newfound boundary. What I didn't expect was how quickly they would come, or how painfully the fallout would test my resolve. That evening, I attended Eleanor's book club for the first time. As I entered the small community room where 6 women were already gathered, I felt a strange sense of being exactly where I needed to be. "Welcome, Joyce," Eleanor said warmly. "We're discussing The Giving Tree tonight, a children's book with a lot to say about unhealthy sacrifice." The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the lifeline these women were offering just when I needed it most. 2 weeks passed without a word from Melissa or Elizabeth. The silence was both painful and liberating. For the first time in years, I had space to think about what I wanted, not just what my family needed from me. Eleanor's book club became an unexpected sanctuary. These women, ranging in age from 55 to 72, shared stories that mirrored my own with startling similarity. Patricia had remortgaged her house to send her son to law school, only to have him move across the country and rarely call. Martha had raised her grandchildren while her daughter pursued a career, then found herself gradually excluded from their lives once they were grown. "It's like I served my purpose," Martha had said during one meeting, her voice cracking. "Now they don't know what to do with me." I recognized myself in their stories, the giving without limits, the gradual erosion of boundaries, the painful awakening to patterns too long ignored. But I also saw something else: resilience. These women weren't bitter, they were rebuilding their lives with newfound wisdom. Inspired by their examples, I began making small changes. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try but never found time for between family obligations. I scheduled a haircut with a stylist Eleanor recommended, trading my practical bob for a softer, more flattering style that framed my face and brought out the silver strands I'd been half-heartedly coloring for years. "You look 10 years younger," my instructor commented during the third watercolor class. "Something's different about you." What was different, I realized, was that I was finally investing in myself, not just in others. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I found myself in the attic, searching through boxes of baby items I'd saved for decades. Among the outdated clothes and yellowed books, I discovered Robert's old rocking chair, the one he'd used to rock Melissa when she was small. The maple wood was still beautiful under a layer of dust, the craftsmanship evident in every curve and joint. An idea began to form. Despite everything, I was about to become a great-grandmother. I might not be financing a designer nursery, but I could offer something more meaningful. I spent the next week carefully restoring the rocking chair, sanding away years of neglect and applying fresh stain that brought out the wood's rich grain. I created a cushion from soft fabric in a pattern of stars and moons, remembering how Melissa had loved stories about the night sky as a child. Next, I found the antique bassinet that had belonged to Robert's family for generations. For generations of babies had slept in it, including Elizabeth and later Melissa herself. The wicker was brittle in places, but with careful attention, I repaired the damaged sections and replaced the faded lining with fresh, soft cotton in a gentle blue. As I worked, memories surfaced like treasures long buried. Robert singing lullabies in his off-key baritone. Elizabeth's first steps, arms outstretched toward my waiting hands. Melissa's childhood laughter echoing through this very house during countless sleepovers. Where had those connections gone? When had money and status replaced the simple joy of being together? With the bassinet and rocking chair restored to their former beauty, I added one final touch, a small quilt I'd made years ago but never given away. The squares contained fabric from significant family moments, a piece of Robert's favorite shirt, a scrap from Elizabeth's graduation dress, even a bit of the blanket Melissa had dragged everywhere as a toddler. When everything was ready, I called Elizabeth, reaching her voicemail as usual. "I have some things for the baby," I said simply. "Family heirlooms. I'd like to drop them off this weekend." 2 days later, Elizabeth called back. "Melissa's having a nursery decorating party on Saturday," she said, her voice careful, neutral. "All her friends will be there helping set up the nursery and bringing gifts." I wasn't invited, I noted, keeping my voice light despite the familiar sting. "It was a last-minute thing," Elizabeth responded, the excuse falling flat between us. "But you could drop the items off before it starts." "Around 10? I agreed, ignoring the painful reality that I was being allowed to deliver gifts but not included in the celebration. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. I loaded the rocking chair and bassinet into my SUV, tucking the quilt carefully on top. As I drove to Melissa and Ryan's suburban home, I practiced what I would say, how I would respond if the reception was cold. The driveway was empty when I arrived, a small mercy. I rang the doorbell, hearing quick footsteps approach. Ryan answered, his expression shifting from expectation to surprise. "Joyce." "Hi." "Hello, Ryan." I brought some things for the baby. I gestured toward my car. Oh. Sure. Let me help you with that. He followed me to the SUV, eyeing the furniture with curiosity. What are these? Family heirlooms, I explained as he carefully lifted the rocking chair. The chair was Robert's. He used it to rock Melissa when she was a baby. And this bassinet has been in his family for 4 generations. Ryan's expression softened as he carried the chair toward the house. That's actually really cool. I didn't know you had these. Inside, I heard female voices and laughter, the party preparations already underway despite the official start time being 2 hours away. Ryan hesitated at the doorway, suddenly awkward. Maybe I should just put these in the garage for now, he suggested. The living room is pretty crazy with decorations and stuff. I understood immediately. I wasn't meant to go inside, to see Melissa or interact with her friends. I was simply making a delivery. That's fine, I said, hiding my hurt behind a practiced smile. The bassinet might need to be cleaned anyway before it's used. I helped Ryan place the items carefully in their spotless garage, then handed him the quilt, explaining its significance. His genuine appreciation made me wonder if he knew how his wife had been treating me, if he understood the family dynamics at play. I should go, I said finally. I don't want to intrude on the party. Ryan looked troubled. Joyce, Before he could finish, the garage door opened and Melissa appeared, her baby bump more pronounced now at 5 months. She froze when she saw me, her expression cycling through surprise, embarrassment, and finally a practiced smile. Grandma, I didn't know you were coming. Just dropping off some family heirlooms for the baby, I said. I'll get out of your way now. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse through the open door of a living room filled with friends, gift bags, and festive decorations. Another celebration I wasn't meant to be part of. I drove home in silence, refusing to let tears fall. The distance between us had never felt so vast, yet somehow, I felt stronger than I had in years. I had given what I could, not money this time, but something far more valuable. What Melissa did with that gift was beyond my control. Back home, I picked up my paintbrush and lost myself in watercolors, creating a scene of a night sky filled with stars, a reminder of stories once shared, and perhaps, of possibilities still to come. The call came at 2:37 a.m., jolting me from a deep sleep. My heart lurched as I fumbled for my phone, years of maternal instinct preparing me for bad news. Mom? Elizabeth's voice was tight with stress. Melissa's in labor. The baby's coming early. I was fully awake instantly. Is she all right? What hospital? Mercy General. She's only at 34 weeks, but the doctor says the baby's lungs are developed enough. Elizabeth paused. She didn't want me to call you. The admission hurt, but I pushed aside the pain. I'm on my way. The hospital corridors were quiet at that hour, my footsteps echoing as I followed signs to the maternity ward. In the waiting area, I found Elizabeth pacing, her normally perfect appearance disheveled from being summoned from bed. Any news? I asked. She shook her head. Ryan's with her. It could be hours yet. We sat in silence, the tension between us palpable. Finally, Elizabeth spoke. I talked to Melissa about the gender reveal party, she said, staring at her hands. She admits she could have handled it better. I nearly laughed at the understatement. That's one way to put it. Mom, you have to understand, she's under a lot of pressure. Ryan's family. Stop making excuses for her, Elizabeth, I said quietly. She's an adult, not a child. Her behavior was cruel, and we both know it. My daughter looked startled by my directness. For years, I'd been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over conflicts and absorbed hurts without complaint. What about the nursery? She asked after a moment. Did you see it when you dropped off those old pieces? Those old pieces are family heirlooms, I corrected. And no, I wasn't allowed inside. I was directed to leave everything in the garage. Elizabeth had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm sure Melissa was just busy with preparations. Elizabeth, I said, meeting her gaze directly, when did you start believing it was acceptable for your daughter to treat me this way? The question hung between us, unanswered as a doctor appeared in the doorway. Family of Melissa Clark, he asked. We both stood. The doctor smiled reassuringly. Mother and baby are doing well. It was a quick delivery for a first-time mom. You can see them shortly. Relief washed over me. Despite everything, I loved Melissa. I loved this baby I hadn't even met yet. 20 minutes later, a nurse led us to Melissa's private room. She looked exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket. Ryan sat beside her, his expression a mixture of wonder and exhaustion. Mom, Melissa said softly, then her eyes found mine. Grandma. You came. Of course I came, I said, moving to the bedside. May I see him? She hesitated, then carefully tilted the bundle so I could see the perfect, miniature face of my great-grandson. His tiny features were still swollen from birth, his eyes squeezed shut, but I had never seen anything more beautiful. His name is Robert, Ryan said, surprising me. Robert James Clark. Tears sprang to my eyes. After my Robert? Ryan nodded. And my grandfather James. Melissa thought you'd like that. I looked at my granddaughter, speechless with emotion. She met my gaze, something vulnerable in her expression. Would you like to hold him? She asked. I sat in the chair Ryan vacated, my arms opening to receive this precious new life. As Robert settled against my chest, a wave of love washed over me so powerful it took my breath away. Hello, little one, I whispered. I'm your great-grandmother. The room fell silent as I rocked gently, humming a lullaby I'd once sung to Melissa. When I finally looked up, I was startled to see tears on my granddaughter's cheeks. He looks right in your arms, she said softly. I returned the baby to her, our hands briefly touching in the exchange. Something had shifted, but I wasn't naive enough to believe one tender moment could repair all the damage between us. 3 days later, Melissa and baby Robert were released from the hospital. I kept my distance, calling only once to check on them, respecting the new parents' need for space during this adjustment period. A week passed, then another. Eleanor's book club continued to be my lifeline, the women providing support as I navigated this new territory of loving from a distance while maintaining my newfound boundaries. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor assured me. Giving them space doesn't mean giving up. It means respecting yourself enough to wait for genuine connection. I was working in my garden when the doorbell rang. To my surprise, Ryan stood on my porch, baby carrier in one hand, diaper bag slung over his shoulder. Ryan, I said, quickly removing my gardening gloves. Is everything all right? He nodded, shifting awkwardly. Melissa's having a rough day. Baby blues, the doctor says. I thought maybe. He hesitated. I thought Robert might like to spend some time with his great-grandmother. I ushered them inside, heart pounding with unexpected joy. As Ryan set up the carrier on my living room floor, I noticed the quilt I'd made tucked around the baby. You're using the quilt, I observed. Ryan's expression softened. It's his favorite. The doctor at the hospital said babies often respond to handmade items. Something about the love that goes into them. I knelt to stroke Robert's downy cheek. And the bassinet? The rocking chair? Ryan's hesitation told me everything. The bassinet is beautiful, but Melissa, she had already ordered a modern crib system before you brought it over. I see, I said, trying to mask my disappointment. The rocking chair is in our bedroom, he added quickly. I use it for middle-of-the-night feedings. It's incredibly comfortable. Before I could respond, Ryan's phone rang. He checked the screen, his expression tightening. It's Melissa. I should take this. He stepped into the hallway, but I could still hear his side of the conversation. Yes, we're at your grandmother's. Because you were crying and needed a break. No, I didn't think. Well, maybe you should have said something before if you felt that way. When he returned, his face was flushed with frustration. We need to go. Melissa's upset that I brought Robert here without specifically discussing it with her first. I swallowed my hurt. I understand. As Ryan gathered the baby things, he paused, looking at me directly. Joyce, there's something you should know. The bassinet and rocking chair, Melissa wanted to get rid of them. She said they didn't match the nursery aesthetic. But you kept the chair, I said. He nodded. And I insisted we store the bassinet properly in the attic. Some things are more important than matching furniture. He hesitated, then added, she's not always like this, you know. Sometimes I think she's just afraid of disappointing everyone, so she ends up disappointing the people who matter most. As they left, I wondered about Ryan's words, about the complex web of expectations and appearances that seemed to drive my granddaughter's choices. And for the first time, I wondered how much of that pattern I had helped create through years of giving without limits. Summer faded into autumn, and Robert grew from a fragile newborn into an alert 3-month-old with his mother's blue eyes and a smile that melted my heart the few times I'd been allowed to see it. Despite Ryan's apparent willingness to include me in their lives, Melissa maintained a careful distance, allowing only occasional brief visits that always felt monitored, controlled. They had another fight about you yesterday, Elizabeth confided during one of our increasingly frequent lunch dates. My relationship with my daughter had been slowly mending as she witnessed Melissa's continued coldness despite my efforts. Ryan wanted to bring Robert for a visit, and Melissa refused. I sighed, pushing my salad around the plate. I don't want to be a source of conflict in their marriage. That's not on you, Mom. Ryan sees what's happening. He told Melissa that cutting you out isn't fair to Robert. I looked up, surprised. He said that? Elizabeth nodded. I think he's starting to understand the pattern. His own parents are apparently very controlling, especially his mother. Maybe he recognizes something familiar. I thought about this revelation as I drove home, wondering about the complex layers of family dynamics at play. Was Melissa unconsciously recreating patterns she'd witnessed? Was I? That evening, Eleanor called with an unexpected invitation. A group of us are taking a weekend trip to Sedona. Patricia has a timeshare. You should join us. My immediate instinct was to decline. What if Melissa needed me? What if there was an emergency with Robert? Then I caught myself, falling back into the familiar pattern of putting my life on hold just in case my family might need something. Wasn't this exactly what I was trying to change? I'd love to go, I said, surprising myself with how right the decision felt. The Sedona trip was transformative. 3 days of hiking red rock trails, sharing stories around evening fires, and forming deeper friendships with women who understood my journey. I returned home feeling refreshed and more certain than ever that reclaiming my own life wasn't selfish, it was necessary. A few days later, I made a decision that had been brewing for months. The 5-bedroom house where I'd raised my family, where Robert and I had built our life together, had become too large, too full of echoes. It was time for a change. I called Elizabeth first. I'm selling the house. Silence, then, Mom, are you sure? That's a big decision. I'm sure. I found a lovely garden condo closer to downtown. It's perfect for this new chapter. Does Melissa know? Not yet, I admitted. I wanted to tell you first, and I'd appreciate your support when I tell her. The conversation with Melissa went exactly as I'd expected: shock, accusations, and finally, the real concern. What about all our things? The family heirlooms? Where will we stay when we visit? I kept my voice gentle but firm. The condo has a lovely guest room that will always be available to family. As for heirlooms, I've cataloged everything and will make sure treasured items stay in the family. But Mom always said the house would eventually be ours, she protested. For Robert to grow up in someday. I didn't point out that until this moment, she'd shown little interest in maintaining family traditions. Instead, I simply said, plans change, Melissa. I need to build a life that works for me now, not someday. The house sold quickly. As moving day approached, I carefully sorted through decades of accumulated treasures, deciding what to keep, what to give away, what to offer to family. The process was both painful and liberating, each item a memory, each decision a small step toward my new life. On the final walkthrough before closing, I found myself alone in the empty house, saying goodbye to the home where I'd experienced both my greatest joys and deepest sorrows. In the nursery that had once belonged to Elizabeth, I whispered a prayer for baby Robert, hoping that someday he would know how deeply he was loved by his great-grandmother. The doorbell interrupted my reverie. To my shock, I opened it to find Melissa standing there, alone, Robert in his carrier at her feet. "Can we come in?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I nodded, stepping aside to let her enter the empty house. She walked slowly through the bare rooms, Robert cradled against her chest, finally stopping in the kitchen where so many family meals had been shared. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said softly. "Saying goodbye to this place." "It's just a house," I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Melissa turned to face me, her expression vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. "I found this in the nursery closet." She held out a small, worn teddy bear I recognized immediately. "It was mine, wasn't it?" I nodded. "You couldn't sleep without it until you were 7. "I don't remember that." She looked down at the bear, then at Robert, who was watching her face with solemn eyes. "There's so much I don't remember. So much I took for granted." I waited, sensing she had more to say. "Ryan and I have been talking," she continued. "About family. About patterns." She swallowed hard. "About how I've been treating you." "Melissa." "Please let me finish," she interrupted. "This is hard enough." She took a deep breath. "I've been horrible to you. The gender reveal, the nursery, everything. And you just kept loving me anyway. You even named your great-grandson after Grandpa Robert." "That was your choice," I reminded her gently. "It was Ryan's suggestion, but I agreed because..." She hesitated. "Because deep down, I knew how much it would mean to you. And how much Grandpa Robert would have loved his great-grandson." Tears filled my eyes as Melissa continued. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm trying to understand why I pushed you away. Why I treated the person who has always loved me unconditionally like she didn't matter. And have you figured it out?" I asked softly. She shrugged, looking suddenly young and lost. "Ryan thinks I was afraid. That I wanted so badly to belong in his world that I was willing to sacrifice my connections to mine." She looked around the empty kitchen. "But standing here now, feeling how much this house means to me even though I've taken it for granted for years, I realize what I almost threw away." I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "It's never too late to change directions, Melissa. Trust me on that." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "Even after everything?" "Even after everything." Robert chose that moment to let out a small, indignant cry. Melissa bounced him gently, but he only grew more insistent. "May I?" I asked, holding out my arms. For the first time, Melissa transferred her son to me without hesitation. As I settled him against my shoulder, his cries immediately softened into contented gurgles. "He knows you," Melissa said, sounding surprised. "Babies are wiser than we give them credit for," I replied, breathing in his sweet scent. "They recognize love." 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, I sat on the patio of my garden condo, watching as Melissa spread a blanket on the grass for 9-month-old Robert. My new home was smaller but filled with light, the walls adorned with my own watercolor paintings alongside cherished family photos. "He's getting so fast with his crawling," I observed as Robert made a determined beeline toward a butterfly fluttering near my flower beds. Melissa laughed, a relaxed sound I was hearing more frequently these days. "Too fast. Baby-proofing is a full-time job." Our relationship was healing, slowly but steadily. The weekly visits that had started awkwardly after our conversation in the empty house had evolved into genuine connections. Melissa was making an effort, and I was learning to trust the change while maintaining the healthy boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. As Robert practiced pulling himself up on a garden chair, babbling happily, Melissa turned to me with a tentative smile. "Mom and I were talking about Thanksgiving," she said. "We thought maybe we could have it here this year. If that's okay with you. Your place is so much cozier than ours." I smiled, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "I'd like that very much." As we watched Robert explore his world with boundless curiosity, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The path to this moment had been painful, but necessary. By finally valuing myself enough to step back, I had created space for something authentic to grow. Love, I had learned, didn't mean sacrificing yourself until nothing remained. Sometimes, the greatest act of love was having the courage to change the patterns that hurt everyone involved. Robert toddled over to me, offering a crumpled dandelion with a drool-covered smile. As I accepted his precious gift, I caught Melissa watching us, her expression soft with something that looked like understanding. We had a long way to go, but we had found our way back to what mattered most, not money or status or appearances, but the simple, profound connection of family who choose to love each other, flaws and all, without conditions or demands. And in that choice, we had all found freedom.